Welcome to the Emotional Balance Sheet, the go-to podcast for parents with multiple kids, especially those with twins, triplets, or more, who are navigating the maze of modern family life and personal finance. Whether you're overwhelmed by education or retirement planning, parenting dilemmas, career transitions, or trying to define your purpose and plan, we're here to guide you with empathy, encouragement, and expertise. Hosted by Paul Fenner, founder of Tama Capital, a certified financial planner and parent to 4 kids, including a set of triplets. Our podcast is your ally in the quest for financial peace of mind, proving that money matters, but family comes first. Subscribe now and join our community of empowered parents at tamacapital.com. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon for investment decisions. Clients of Tama may retain positions in the securities discussed in this podcast.
What does comprehensive financial planning even mean? At Tama Capital, it means a family office where lifestyle planning such as retirement, college, portfolio management, and tax prep and planning are all under one umbrella. But it goes beyond numbers. We focus as much on the emotional side of financial planning as we do on the financial side. We get you. We understand your challenges of building a family, business or career, and a healthy life. We are devoted to wealth planning for families like yours because we are you. Learn how our family can help your family by visiting tamacapital.com. How do you manage stress in the face of small or large-scale events? Dr. Teryn Clarke is back with us to tackle a pressing issue: how to manage stress when trauma feels like it's all around us, especially given the recent events of the fires in California. Dr. Clarke, who's based in Orange County, shares firsthand accounts of the devastation, highlighting the emotional toll on displaced families and communities. Our conversation centers on effective techniques for managing stress, with an emphasis on the importance of microdoses. Yes, microdoses of relaxation through simple breathing exercises. Dr. Clarke explains the impacts of stress on the body, particularly the elevated levels of cortisol and how they can be mitigated. We also cover the benefits of maintaining good nutrition, the critical role of socialization in mental health, and practical tips on how both adults and children can handle anxiety and stress in their daily life. So whether you're dealing with minor daily stressors or major life events, this episode provides actionable insights to help you maintain your emotional balance. Please enjoy my conversation with Dr. Teryn Clarke. So, Dr. Teryn, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me, Paul.
How are you doing? People have listened to our conversations before, know you're in California, Orange County specifically, but how are you doing with the fire situation?
I mean, we're really lucky, thankfully, that Orange County hasn't had fires during this season, but LA is sure under attack. I mean, as we're recording this, the big fires in LA are still going on and not fully contained. And just the scale is unimaginable. I mean, how many people are displaced? I feel like everywhere we go in our city, you hear people at the next table at the restaurant saying, "Oh, these are our friends staying with us because they're under evacuation." Like, it's crazy. We have friends that have lost their homes who are renting now, moving down here because there's just no way to restart up there. There's not enough housing, moving their kids in school. Like, the scale is, I just have never seen it like this. I mean, nobody's seen it like this. It's just completely unimaginable.
So I know this is a loaded question. I'm not sure how you even begin to answer it, but how do you deal with the emotional, I guess, more like trauma of the situation?
I mean, I think one of the major needs is people need trauma counseling, and there just isn't enough of it available. I mean, last night I saw a report that there's been 24,000 FEMA claims filed already as a result of these fires. So it just tells you the scale of people who are suffering and have experienced property loss. And talking to a friend who lost her home pretty early on in the Palisades area. It's horrible to lose everything, but also their entire community they lost immediately. So she's been staying with her parents, but she said, I also lost all my friends. We don't have any of our routines. We can't really get together. Everybody is staying with families spread apart, Southern California. And then on top of that, there's just no time because her whole life is dealing with insurance and trying to get her kids in school and trying to get clothing. And just like there's no opportunity for emotional care. So on that scale, it's we really just haven't seen anything like this. So that scale is difficult to manage for people who aren't dealing with that and are dealing with, lesser forms of stress. I think there are some really good ways to think about interrupting stress and trying to keep your stress hormones down from the day-to-day stuff. And even for people who are going through that, I've worked on stress with my patients. I've worked on it personally. I mean, a good example of what I thought was a major stressor in comparison is not a major stressor, but we went through an audit and I got to the point where your listeners might be able to relate is every time I looked at my email on my phone and I saw there was an email from my CPA, I could feel the adrenaline rush out of my adrenal glands, on my back. I could feel that surge. I could feel my heart start racing. And so, anytime we're having that kind of stress and email is a big trigger for stress like that, we can interrupt that stress and try to bring down the adrenaline, the cortisol, and our heart rate pretty quickly by interrupting that stress with simple breathing exercises.
Yeah, when we were talking about this, like you had used the term like interrupt stresses with microdoses. What do you kind of mean by that? And ironically, I was, our Dr. Jen Dragonette, who I have on the show frequently, who's a licensed therapist, we were supposed to talk tomorrow, and she got pulled aside because her expertise in therapy is in trauma. So her phone is like ringing off the hook. So I'm glad to be talking a little bit about this with you today. So how do you interrupt stress with microdoses? You mentioned breathing, which I'm a huge fan of. Can you go maybe a little bit more in depth on that? And then how does it actually like calm the nerves, I guess? Is that?
Yeah, it actually does. So we have those two parts of our nervous system. We have the sympathetic system, which is our fight or flight. And that system is really oh my gosh, I can't speak. And that system is involved with cortisol or our stress hormone. So cortisol, as you know, is supposed to go up in the morning. It helps us wake up. And then through the rest of the day, it's supposed to go down. That's the way we're originally designed. And then we have spikes of cortisol when we have a big stressor. That's our kind of evolutionary design. If we're being chased by a beast, if we're, under mortal threat, we release a big dose of cortisol. And what that does is it dumps sugar into the bloodstream from the liver so that our muscles have enough energy that they can, get away from whatever's happening. What's happened with modern
cortisol,
life?
Is that like I think of like the term like shot of adrenaline. Is that basically,
Yes, it's involved. That's the same system. Exactly.
Okay.
So what's happened with our modern lifestyle is that we're getting smaller spikes of stress throughout the daytime. It's gotten a lot worse since we've had smartphones, so that we have that, big spike of cortisol in the morning like we're supposed to. But because we're getting all these little spikes of cortisol throughout the day, it's never getting low. And it's supposed to be lowest when we go to bed as melatonin's coming up. Those two hormones are supposed to be kind of in opposition, fluctuating throughout the day. And so we get this chronic elevated cortisol, which is, triggers inflammation. It keeps our blood sugar high when it shouldn't be. So it contributes to insulin resistance and eventually diabetes. It promotes aging, heart disease, stroke. It's when it's chronically elevated, it is associated with disease and chronic disease especially. So it's really important.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jen, but how do you know like when it's like elevated? Are there like signs like what are there clear-cut signs of elevated levels of cortisol? And if you see that, like what do you do about it? Obviously, get to your doctor as soon as possible, or
Right.
like,
Well, meaning if you're feeling stressed a lot of the time, or especially if you have, a stressful or negative reaction to something, I keep just coming back to email because that's the easiest one. I think people can feel they're kind of going through their day and then they see an email and they go, oh no. Okay, you're having a cortisol spike. When you have that oh no feeling, and probably no is not the word that comes to mind, it's probably something else. That's a really good time to reset. And so what you're trying to do is when you're in your sympathetic system, or your sympathetic system is more stimulated, you want to switch over to your parasympathetic system, which is nicknamed, instead of fight or flight, this one is rest and digest. And so we want to shift our system over to rest and digest and settle that cortisol down. And so the interesting thing is you can do that with breathing. And we've, elucidated the mechanisms that happens with. And interestingly, when you're breathing in your upper part of your lungs, which if your listeners just take a couple breaths, like, like in your upper lungs, when you hyperventilate, that's what you're doing. You can bring on the feeling of stress. So what I would suggest, if your listeners are in a place where they can just kind of chill out and take a couple breaths, which is probably not while they're driving because you need both hands to do it. If you put one hand on your chest and you put one hand on your stomach and you just take a couple breaths, pay attention to if your chest hand is moving more or if your belly hand is moving more. And when we're trying to switch to relaxation breathing, to switch to our parasympathetic system, we want to really be breathing with our belly because that's pulling the diaphragm down and it's filling the lower part of the lungs. And what happens when the lower part of the lungs fill is that triggers our parasympathetic system, our rest and digest. So that's where these kind of microdoses of relaxation can come in, because you can actually shift your system into parasympathetic mode by stopping and taking a couple deep breaths into your belly and really filling your lungs and then getting it all out, filling it again a couple times. And another thing to think about when you do that is you want to breathe in and out through your nose, but you don't want to hear your breath. It shouldn't be if you hear your breath like that in your nasal passages and you're not allergic or having a cold, you're constricting your upper airways and you're not getting the full breath. So when you're breathing into your abdomen like that, you want to visualize more the air coming through your throat. Don't visualize it coming through the tip of your nose, as sometimes we do in meditation. Think about it coming through your throat. And when you're doing that, you'll really naturally open up those upper airways and get a full, deep, relaxing breath. And I think the magic about that is you can do it anytime without anybody noticing. I mean, you can do it at work if something stressful is happening. If you have a stressful interaction, you come back to your desk. You can take those deep breaths without anybody knowing it. And it really will interrupt that stress response instead of letting it go on unchecked. So I think it's really important whenever we feel that stress to interrupt it like that. It only takes a couple breaths. It will bring your heart rate down. It will switch your system over to parasympathetic. It will start to bring that cortisol down. So it's really impactful.
I'm just thinking of one of my girls, Madison, who kind of struggles with anxiety, and I encourage her all the time, like, just take a breath. And she's like, no, it doesn't work for me.
Right.
Do you have any secrets for getting a kid to try to breathe?
Oh my gosh, that's I mean, with kids, part of it would be emphasizing how brief it is. They don't want to take the time. And so,
right.
Some kids think it's like has to be a half an hour meditation, although a half an hour meditation would be awesome. But even just stopping for a moment, because once people get into that anxious feeling, they definitely switch to breathing through their chest more. And, and that keeps it going. With kids, if you can get them to buy in and do it with you, that can be helpful. Once they start to get the feeling of what's happening, it can be really beneficial. One of the things I like for adults, but it might be helpful with kids, are some of those There's those programs that do the tonal meditation. So it's not that you're listening to somebody's voice, is that it's tonal and you're just breathing with the tones. And that can really get you into some relaxation breathing and focusing on something else. Sometimes kids don't like the woo-woo-ness of the meditation and the talking. So that could be a beneficial, strategy. But it is hard to get kids into the pattern of self-care. It's just, I don't think it's their natural state, especially when they're teenagers. Their natural state is so external,
Their natural state, I feel like, is inflicting trauma on me.
Right. Yeah.
But the therapist that I work with, she's gotten me into this box breathing, where you breathe in through your nose, 6 times and out through your mouth 3, or vice versa. Sometimes it's good to change it up. Does that help from, how does that impact your brain health? Obviously, as you mentioned, you want to try to get that cortisol level down throughout the day. Are there any impacts of the brain that we should think about from a neurological standpoint?
Yeah, and you bring up a really good point. When you're doing those deep breaths, you can also do a pattern. So you can just take deep breaths in and out, but you could also do those deep belly breaths in a box pattern, which could be a 4 count, a 6 count, 4 in, hold 4, 4 out, hold 4, or 6. There's a couple different patterns. I have a couple different patterns that I mentioned in the book. So you can combine a breath timing pattern and be sure that what you don't want to do is do box breathing, but not have it deep. You don't want to box breathe into your upper lungs.
Okay.
Then you're not interrupting the stress. You're still stimulating the sympathetic system. You're not getting the full benefit of the pattern if you're not getting the air filled into your lower lungs. And then, so the biggest effect is through cortisol on the brain, because cortisol is so pro-inflammatory. And so that connection of causing inflammation in the arteries that feed the brain, that's one of the major pathways of Alzheimer's is inflammation of those arteries leading to atherosclerosis. And then the oxygenation is also really healthy for the brain. The more oxygen we get to the brain, the better our thinking will be, the better our focus will be. And high blood pressure is not particularly good for the brain either. The brain will regulate against it. So when we're stressed and our blood pressure is going up, that's also negative for the brain. So those are some of the reasons that it's really important. And then also, if we're going to bed at the end of the day and we still have high cortisol, that's another time to incorporate some sort of relaxation breathing to try to get the cortisol down, because we need to get to sleep, and good sleep is really important for those cleaning mechanisms we've talked about, where the brain actually detoxifies during deep sleep. So elevated cortisol in the nighttime can interrupt that process as well. So there's numerous connections between stress and brain health.
So we talked a lot about stress it's just a natural part of life, whether we're living in today's world or, 1,000 years ago when we were getting chased by tigers and lions in the savannah or whatever, or jungle. Are there any other, besides breathing exercises, that we can do to manage the stress when it comes, I guess? Is there things that we can do from a pre-game, post-game, before the stress gets here and after the stress gets here?
Just having good baseline nutrition is helpful, because stress does change our cravings. It changes our metabolism. So, having good baseline nutrition with whole foods, adequate protein, plenty of fruits and vegetables is beneficial. If we're eating a lot of processed foods, we just start to wear down our proper metabolism and our resilience and resistance to some of the processes that are so negative for health that get exacerbated with stress.
Because I'm assuming studies show that when most people are stressed, they reach for probably the not healthiest of foods. Yeah,
they do. And, it's part of that, the cortisol, it's making our sugar high, but it's also making us insulin resistant. So it can beget those cravings as well. And then a lot of times when the stress lets down, people will have, a sudden hunger. And if they're not prepared, kind of with having, healthy snacks in their purse or their car, we're gonna grab what's most accessible, and that's usually a processed food, something shelf stable, the gas station or something we pick up. So that's part of it. And then socializing and not being afraid to reach out for formal therapy is so important. Stuffing that stress and not talking about either friends, family, coworkers, or professional, that it really is important to use those more natural mechanisms to try to spare the use of pharmaceuticals in terms they usually don't work in isolation. They don't work without all those other parts. They're part of the puzzle, but they're not the whole treatment. So
yeah, I think you make a really good point there. Is people are often looking for like one silver bullet answer, like, okay, if I just do this, it'll help with, reducing my stress. But like to your point, it's different things at different times that work well in some situations versus others. So we've obviously talked a lot about breathing. I'm glad you brought up socialization, because I've been reading a lot about how we become kind of an anti-social culture. Like, we're not socializing as much as we used to, and we're kind of pulling back. And I was just listening to a podcast, Plain English, by Derek Thompson on this very topic. And it's really interesting how dynamically we've changed, where, whether it's cell phones or social media, we're just not interacting with people on a daily basis like we have. And, I guess there's some studies that link, depression and that together, stress and that together. There's a lot of probably things working in together that does not put us in a good position. But back to your point, looking at putting as many toolbox in your tool belt as you can to be able to deal with the minors and the major, stresses that come into your life. Obviously, the people out in California like yourself, losing your home, losing everything, that's extremely stressful. You mentioned like getting that email during the day, stressful. But being able to have various things to pull from and know when to pull from, I think highlights, a lot of the points that you've made throughout our conversation today.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing about socializing, we have an example of an age group that has historically suffered from social isolation. That's the elderly. So that's been a pattern for generations. Well, a couple generations, not a lot of generations, because we used to have our elderly live with us.
Right.
But since we haven't had that dynamic, at least in the United States, as much, the elderly have really suffered. Their rates of depression have soared, higher rates of Alzheimer's disease. And so we've seen how social isolation has changed people. And I'm sure in the podcast they were mentioning, what we're seeing now is that level of isolation, which was relatively isolated into the older population, coming down through all ages. It's hitting middle age, we're working from home, but it's hitting teenagers who were historically one of the most social groups, and they're isolated and thinking that socializing on the phone is a substitute. I mean, we've completely removed socialization, and then we're processing it and trying to feed it back to them through a device. And it's synthetic, and it's missing a lot of the components that socializing should and has had. So, the levels of anxiety, depression in teens is not surprising, because their pattern of movement and socialization has totally turned upside down, and with an emphasized comparison, which is a problem for them, and the negative aspects of bullying that seem to be so pronounced when we're only communicating through a device. So I don't know how we undo it. Some people have, suggested that if you want to try to move some of your stressful events to the morning when your cortisol is already spiked, you're already like, what you don't want to do is, I'm going to check my emails one more time before I go to bed. Why would you do that? There's nothing you can do about it. It's only going to play into your dreams all night, your lack of sleep, spike your cortisol right before you go to bed. So, even understanding just the natural way our cortisol should go can help you kind of shift your day of when you're going to deal with stressful things. And, at dinner time, maybe that's no phones the rest of the night. I think that's a really healthy start. But it is hard. There's no one treatment. It's all of it. It's all of it has to work together in concert.
So I know I certainly do not want to keep you long today because of everything that you've got going on and are dealing with. So I greatly appreciate you having, carving out the time for us as always. These conversations are tremendous, and I know that they're a huge help to everyone that listens. So we thank you, Dr. Teryn, and wish everybody well out there.
Thank you so much for having me. Appreciate it, Paul.
There's 2 points about my conversation with Dr. Clarke that I can't overemphasize, which is, first, it doesn't take much to be able to calm our nerves, to find some way to relax. And the word that we used over and over again was microdoses, and specifically in breathing. And I think that the challenge with handling any type of stress that we've talked about with Dr. Clarke or Dr. Dragonette over the last 6 to 8 months is the ability to be aware, that word awareness, to be able to see the stress, to see the stop sign, and to actually stop, gain your composure, pull out whatever tools in your toolbox, like a simple box breathing exercise, and be able to find that release valve, if you will. I think the second major point is socialization, or another way to say it, social isolation, which isn't just a problem for the elderly. It's a problem affecting all of us. It's much easier for us to stay in tonight, not go out with friends or family, and that really takes a toll on us emotionally and mentally, and we probably don't even realize it. Especially as Dr. Clarke explained, with what's going on in California right now with these fires, is that these communities that are completely devastated, wiped out, are still coming together to be able to support one another in the face of this tragedy. So being able to find those microdoses of relaxation, to be able to find that awareness, and to be social. Those are 2 keys that Dr. Clarke stressed, to be able to find that emotional balance or harmony when stress is all around you. Now that you've made it to the end of another great conversation, are you looking for more? If so, head over to tamacapital.com, where you will find all of our conversations. Use the search feature to find the topic or guest you would love to learn more about. Also, don't forget to make someone else's day by sharing our show. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next time.